بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي رئيس مجلس الأمن، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، تنعقد هذه الجلسة في ظل ظروف حرجة ومؤلمة وإثر تطورات خطيرة في قطاع غزة تسببت في سقوط الآلاف الضحايا من المدنيين وتنذر بكارثة إنسانية وشيكة.
All right, that is the United Nations draft resolution which is taking place, and it is a meeting, a quarterly open debate there being conducted on the Middle East, and we've heard the contributions coming out from the South African Minister on International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor there, saying that, when it comes to South Africa's calls, they've made it clear that they're calling for a ceasefire and the opening of humanitarian corridors. And of course, at the same time, they're saying that there has been a series of a violation of a humanitarian law by both Hamas and Israel, and also expressing concern on the violence, the attacks by both Israel and Hamas and the killings of innocent people. The minister there also saying that there are inadequacies of the council when it comes to maintaining peace and stability in the world, and calling on the council to work even harder so that we stop a repetition and seeing a repeat of history continuing to repeat itself, and just talking about witnessing cruelty. Around the world, everybody's witnessing what is taking place in the Middle East, and also then saying that she is appalled, and rather South Africa being appalled at the Security Council and how it has handled this issue in the Middle East. And for more on this discussion, we now bring in Zeenat Adam, Deputy Executive Director for the Afro-Middle East Centre, and she joins us for more on the United Nations Security Council quarterly open debate on the Middle East. Zeenat, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. We've heard the contributions there being made by the Minister of International Relations when it comes to that draft resolution. Perhaps let's start off just with your reaction from what we've heard from the Minister's statement.
Well, I think the Minister's statement has been very fair, very direct, and keeping to what South Africa's principled position has been on the two-state solution, on the issues of international humanitarian law, calling on the Geneva Conventions, re-emphasizing the need for the reform of the United Nations because of the absolute failure of the Security Council to take on the responsibility to protect civilians who are under fire right now. I think that the Minister has really emphasized the need for the international community to come together and to set aside the differences. But I was extremely disturbed by the statement of Hungary ahead of the minister, which to me sounded like the rhetoric that we've been hearing from most of the Western countries, which is deeply Islamophobic, deeply Arab-phobic, talking about migration and worrying about people of other ethnicities coming into Europe, talking about anti-democratic principles, trying to curb people from going and having freedom of expression, and re-emphasizing the need and for Israel to defend itself. At what cost are we allowing Israel to defend itself? Right now, we're looking at numbers of over 5,000 people who have been killed. This is extremely disproportionate in the situation that we're facing, and it's only escalating, children and women being the main targets of Israel in the last 2 weeks.
And let's also zoom into the comments there made by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres there, also having strong words in the House and talking about that no one is above international humanitarian law. What do you make of those comments?
We're talking about no one having being above international humanitarian law, but it's taken so many weeks for Antonio Guterres to actually come forward and say those words. What we have been noticing is that the United States, the UK, and now France have gone to endorse Israel's actions against Gaza and saying that this is in defense of Israel. But Israel is also incurring into the West Bank, where Hamas does not govern the area. We're talking about Gaza having been under complete siege for the past 17 years. That is an air, sea, and land blockade where people cannot go in, cannot go out. There is no humanitarian access. And the failure of this United Nations Security Council, there was a resolution proposed by Russia, which was shot down. There was a resolution proposed by Brazil, also shot down. Now the United States has crafted language that doesn't call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. What it calls for is humanitarian pauses. A pause can last 1 second or 1 minute, and it doesn't really give clarity on how that pause would be used to address the humanitarian situation or to actually enforce the humanitarian law.
Why would you say that? It seems as if, there seems to be no willingness to entertain what you are saying, a humanitarian ceasefire, which is exactly what the South African president is calling for, because, I mean, nobody benefits from war.
Absolutely, no one benefits from war. And more than anything, what we're looking at is that the settler colonial mentality is fueling this war even further. We know that Israel has had a very right-wing government in the last few months. There have been debates within Israel itself about repealing judicial laws so that they could overcome certain democratic principles, and that's playing out into the kind of response that they're having to what happened on the 7th of October. And it's really brutal. What we're also witnessing is an escalation of war profiteering by the United States. They have already deployed 2 aircraft carriers, at least a dozen ships, and they have continued their pledge to arm Israel even further with more military arsenal and armada that they could use against the Palestinians, who at this stage are armed with very little, if we're talking about Hamas. And actually the kind of atrocities that are being committed and perpetrated are on civilians, on ordinary humans, ordinary people, children. We're looking at over 2,000 children who have been killed. And the images coming out of Gaza are unbelievable. We are watching what the minister described and the analogy she had to Rwanda, that we are certainly watching a genocide play out. If we don't act now, the international community is going to be deeply regretful of what we allow to happen in the name of defense of Israel.
At the same time, when we're hearing those submissions, earlier on we saw Israel's ambassador calling for the resignation of Antonio Guterres, the UN's Secretary General. What do you make of these latest calls for resignation of the Secretary General?
Well, Israel is really a bully. They don't hear what they want to hear, and so then they would call for a resignation of somebody who is presenting a much more balanced and fair perspective, calling on them to honor the international humanitarian laws, calling on them to honor the UN Security Council resolutions that Minister Naledi Pandor emphasized, talking about the two-state solution and talking about Israel withdrawing to the 1967 borders, removing their settlements, allowing the discussions for a peace process towards Palestine having sovereignty, which they have never had. For 75 years, they have been under this brutal occupation of white settler colonialism. And so when they don't hear what they want to hear from Antonio Guterres, they then threaten and demand his resignation.
All right, then, Zeenat Adam, thank you so much for your time there and that insight. That is Zeenat Adam. She is the Deputy Executive Director for Afro-Middle East Centre.